You can leave your DNA on an object you never touched, and someone else's DNA can end up on your hands even when you've never met them. That does not make DNA evidence useless. It reveals something far more important. DNA can be extraordinarily good at answering whose biological material may be present, while being much less direct about how it got there. Let's break down what DNA evidence can actually prove, what it cannot prove by itself, and why those two questions can completely change how you understand a crime scene. Think of DNA evidence like glitter. Not because DNA literally behaves like glitter, but because the analogy captures the problem investigators face. Glitter transfers, it persists, it moves from one surface to another. You can pick it up without noticing, carry it somewhere else, and leave some behind. Finding glitter on your jacket can tell us something about contact somewhere in the chain. But the glitter alone may not tell us exactly when that contact happened, what you were doing, or whether you ever touched the original source. DNA creates a much more sophisticated version of that puzzle. Mechanism 1. The match is not the story. Start with what forensic DNA does remarkably well. Your cells contain DNA, and forensic laboratories can examine specific regions of that DNA to produce a profile. When biological material recovered from an object generates a suitable profile, analysts can compare that profile with a known sample. That comparison can become extremely informative. But notice what question is being asked. Whose DNA could this be? That is a source-level question. It is fundamentally different from asking, how did this person's DNA get onto this object? Imagine investigators recovered DNA from the handle of an object involved in a crime. A comparison strongly supports that the DNA originated from a particular person rather than an unrelated person. That can be powerful evidence about biological source. But now change the question. Did that person hold the object during the crime? DNA alone may not answer that. The biological profile does not contain a timestamp. It does not record motive. It does not contain a miniature video of the moment it was deposited. The glitter tells you it arrived. It does not automatically tell you the journey. Mechanism 2. You are constantly shedding biological material. When people hear DNA evidence, they often imagine blood, saliva, semen, or a visible biological stain. Those can indeed provide DNA. But modern forensic work can also involve very small quantities of biological material associated with ordinary contact. This is commonly discussed as touch or trace DNA. Every interaction between your body and your environment creates opportunities for biological material to move. You handle your phone, you open a door, you touch a table, you shake someone's hand, you pick up an object another person handled moments earlier. Now return to the glitter analogy. Imagine your hands are carrying an invisible dusting of biological glitter. Some originated from you. Some material encountered in your environment may have originated from other people. You touch surface A. Later, you touch surface B. The question is no longer simply whether biological material can move. The forensic question becomes, which transfer pathway best explains the evidence that was actually recovered? And that introduces the first major misconception. Finding someone's DNA somewhere does not necessarily mean that person directly touched that exact surface. Direct transfer is one possibility. Indirect transfer can be another. Mechanism 3. DNA can travel through intermediaries. Picture 3 people, Alex, Ben, and Kara. Alex and Ben shake hands. Later, Ben picks up a shared object. Under some circumstances, biological material originating from Alex could potentially be transferred through Ben to that object. Alex never needed to touch it directly. This is secondary, or indirect transfer. The important word is could. Secondary transfer does not mean every DNA result has an innocent explanation. It does not mean analysts should assume DNA arrived indirectly, and it certainly does not erase the evidential value of DNA. It means there may be competing pathways. This distinction matters because forensic interpretation is not supposed to ask only, can we detect this person's DNA? It may also need to consider competing explanations for how the biological material arrived. Think about our glitter again. If glitter from your shirt appears on my chair, perhaps you sat there, but perhaps I hugged you, picked up glitter on my clothes, and later sat on that chair myself. Same glitter. Different history. The forensic challenge is determining which history is better supported when the DNA result is considered alongside the circumstances and other evidence. Mechanism 4. Transfer is only the first gate. Researchers studying forensic DNA transfer often consider a broader chain involving transfer, persistence, prevalence, and recovery. Think of these as 4 doors your biological glitter has to pass through. Door 1 is transfer. Can biological material move from the source onto a person or object under the relevant type of contact? Door 2 is persistence. Once deposited, does enough material remain there long enough to matter? Material can be affected by subsequent contact, environmental conditions, cleaning, handling, and time. So deposition is not necessarily the end of the story. Door 3 is prevalence. What biological material might already be present in that environment before the event investigators care about? Everyday environments are not sterile laboratories. Objects can have histories, shared objects can have many users, surfaces can accumulate biological material through ordinary activity. Then comes door 4, recovery. Even if DNA is present, what investigators recover depends on sampling and laboratory processes. The sample collected from a surface is not a perfect census of every biological molecule that has ever touched it. Transfer, persistence, prevalence, recovery. That chain changes the question from, was DNA found, to something much more scientifically useful. What processes could have produced the DNA result we are looking at? That is a harder question, but it is the right one. Mechanism 5. Mixtures turn one voice into a crowded room. Now imagine investigators swab an object touched by several people. The resulting DNA sample may contain material from multiple contributors. Think of a clean single-source profile as listening to one person speaking in a quiet room. A mixture is different. Now several people are talking at once. With 2 clear voices, you may still separate much of what each person is saying. Add more voices. Make some loud and others faint. Add background noise. Let some pieces of information disappear. Now interpretation becomes harder. DNA mixtures are not automatically unreliable. Many can be interpreted, but complexity matters, particularly when the sample contains small quantities of DNA or multiple contributors. One challenge is determining how many people contributed biological material to the sample. Another is accounting for signals that may be weak or incomplete, and another is evaluating how well different proposed contributors explain the genetic information observed in the mixture. This is where a popular crime show image begins to fall apart. Real forensic DNA analysis is not always a computer displaying a face beside the word match. Sometimes the biological evidence looks more like several overlapping conversations, and the scientific job is to evaluate which explanations fit that conversation better. Mechanism 6. A statistic is not a verdict. This may be the most important distinction in the entire video. Modern DNA interpretation can involve statistical models. In complex mixture cases, probabilistic genotyping software may help analysts evaluate the DNA data under competing propositions. But the software is not reconstructing the crime. It is evaluating genetic evidence under specified assumptions and propositions. Those are different jobs. Imagine a scale. On one side is one explanation for the DNA evidence. On the other is an alternative explanation. The analysis asks how much better the observed DNA data fit one proposition than another within the model being used. That can be enormously useful. But the number produced by an analysis should not magically transform into, this is the probability that the suspect committed the crime. That leap crosses from evaluating biological evidence into evaluating guilt. DNA cannot make that leap alone. The courtroom question involves far more than genetics. Witness evidence, timelines, object history, opportunity, surveillance, statements, physical evidence, and the circumstances under which the sample was collected. The DNA is one part of the system, potentially a powerful part, but still one part. Mechanism 7. Source and activity are different questions. Suppose a person's DNA is detected on a knife. The dramatic interpretation is immediate. They use the knife. But scientifically, slow that sentence down. There are at least 2 different questions hiding inside it. Question 1. Whose DNA is represented in the sample? Question 2. What activity caused that DNA to be deposited? The first is about source. The second is about activity. And the second question can be much harder. Maybe the person handled the knife during the event being investigated. Maybe they handled it earlier. Maybe the knife was shared. Maybe another transfer pathway is plausible. Which explanation matters depends on the circumstances. This is why context is not decoration around DNA evidence. Context changes what the DNA means. The same biological finding on two different objects can have very different significance because the objects have different histories, locations, users, and opportunities for transfer. DNA on a personal toothbrush is not interpreted in the same context as DNA on a shared door handle. The molecules may obey the same biology. The evidential questions do not. Mechanism 8. Contamination is a different problem. Transfer happens in ordinary life. Contamination refers to unwanted introduction of biological material during processes such as evidence handling, collection, transport, examination, or laboratory work. Do not confuse the two. Return to the glitter. Transfer is glitter, moving through the events investigators are trying to understand. Contamination is new glitter, entering the evidence pathway when it should not. Forensic laboratories therefore use procedures designed to reduce and monitor contamination risk. Collection methods, protective equipment, controls, separation procedures, cleaning practices, documentation, and laboratory protocols all matter because modern DNA methods can detect small quantities of biological material. Sensitivity is a superpower, but every superpower creates a new problem. The better you become at detecting tiny biological signals, the more carefully you must ask whether every detected signal is relevant to the event under investigation. A signal can be real DNA and still require interpretation. That distinction is crucial. Mechanism 9. More sensitive does not always mean more informative. Imagine turning up the gain on a microphone. At first, you hear the speaker more clearly. Turn it higher, and you begin hearing the air conditioner, footsteps outside, chairs moving, and someone whispering at the back of the room. The microphone became more sensitive. The meaning did not automatically become clearer. DNA technology faces a related conceptual challenge. Detecting small quantities of DNA can reveal biological material that older methods might not have detected. That can help investigations enormously. But increased sensitivity also makes the history of the sample more important. Where was the object before collection? Who normally handles it? Was it shared? Could there have been prior contact? Could biological material have moved indirectly? How was it collected and processed? Those questions do not attack DNA science. They are part of using DNA science correctly. And this brings us to the biggest myth. People often frame DNA evidence in two extremes. Either DNA is infallible, the molecule has spoken, case closed, or DNA is unreliable, transfer exists, therefore nothing can be trusted. Both positions miss the science. DNA profiling can provide extraordinarily powerful evidence about biological source. At the same time, the significance of a DNA finding depends on what question you are asking. If the question is source, the genetic profile may provide very strong information. If the question is activity, the scientist may need to think about transfer pathways, persistence, object history, mixture complexity, sampling, and the surrounding circumstances. The DNA did not become weaker. The question became bigger. That is the part television rarely has time to show. A forensic DNA result is not a complete story preserved inside a molecule. It is evidence that must be interpreted at the correct level. So when you hear that someone's DNA was found at a crime scene, do not immediately ask only one question. Was it a match? Ask 3. Whose biological material may be represented? How could that material have arrived there? And what does that actually tell us about the activity being investigated? Those questions protect you from both mistakes, treating DNA as magic and dismissing it as meaningless. Remember the glitter. Finding it can be extraordinarily revealing. Its pattern, quantity, location, and context can help reconstruct what happened. But a speck of glitter does not carry its travel history written on its surface. Neither does a DNA profile. The real power of forensic genetics comes from knowing exactly which question the biology can answer, and refusing to make the molecule answer a question it cannot.